All right, everyone. Welcome to session 5. It is Wednesday, August 23rd. It's about 6:04 p.m. Central Time. We've got a guest speaker again tonight. We've got Greg Drobny. So he's going to talk to you about some of the logistics around what it takes to join Code Platoon. It's going to be the same process that we had on Monday with Guillermo. He's going to kind of talk about what he does here, and then he's going to open up the floor for a Q&A session. And again, what I encourage you to do is if you've got any questions for Greg, please ask Greg. Don't wait. Don't be shy. Don't wait for Greg to leave and then ask me, because then I'm just going to have to go tell you to ask Greg. And without any further ado, Greg, why don't you go ahead and take it?
Yeah. Thanks, Charles. Appreciate it. And appreciate you offering the time for me to drop in and answer some questions. As Charles said, I deal mostly with introducing people to the program itself, kind of onboarding and just answering questions for people who are getting out of the military and want to know what it is we do. With regards to that, you guys are already doing probably the biggest step in this whole process, which is being part of Intro to Coding. That is where, as one of my main roles, is to direct people to Intro to Coding, but then also to answer the logistical questions of how do I actually join a cohort and fund it, and all of those kind of crazy things. Take down my email. It's super easy. It's on the screen now, as you can see, greg@codeplatoon.org. Feel free to email me at any time in this whole process, and I'm happy to interact with you either via email or Slack or on the phone. If you want to set up a time to talk, I'll happily talk to you one-on-one. But for now, we'll just go over a few brief things, and then, like Charles said, we can open up for questions. So next slide. For those of you who don't know, our main flagship program, as you can see, 15-week immersive full web development. The goal here is to turn you into a junior software engineer. As Charles can attest, that is the goal, and it's what we're pretty decent at, because Charles is living proof that it works. And that's what we do here. The full-time upcoming cohorts are listed on the screen here. Whiskey Platoon is the next available. The application deadlines are the ones in red there. That means getting your entire application in by those dates. A quick note here, though, and I should have noticed this before. It says part-time nights and weekends. It's important for the VA purposes that it's technically an evening and weekends program that's not considered part-time. And the reason that's important is for a question that will come up for a lot of you, which is whether or not vet tech can be used to pay for our evening and weekends program. And the answer is yes, it can be, because the VA stipulates that vet tech cannot be used for a part-time program, which is why we structured our evening and weekends program the way we did. It meets their requirements to not be considered part-time. So the evening and weekends programs that we offer will be fully vet tech eligible. Moving forward, the next one, as you can see there, Foxtrot, starts January 8th. Application deadline is also in November. So both of the next available cohorts have application deadlines in November. And then DevOps moving forward, all we have planned right now is evening and weekends. That seems to be more popular with people who are already working in the industry. So that's just kind of how that's working out right now. It may change in the future, but as of right now, we only have that planned for evening and weekends classes. Next slide, please. How do I pay for Code Platoon? Again, that's a really common question. This is a big question that a lot of people have. Let me start by saying that it's been the goal of Code Platoon since its inception to make this affordable for everyone. Code Platoon has done wonders to make sure that no one is going into massive debt to go to Code Platoon. We find ways to make this affordable to everyone. I've been here 3.5 years. I've never seen someone not attend because they couldn't afford the tuition. It's just never happened. Now, we've had people who could only use a scholarship and they really wanted that living stipend that came along with the VA, and so they decided not to, but tuition has never been a barrier for attendance as long as I've been here. So the options that we're looking at right here, vet tech, number one. A lot of people asking about vet tech recently. VA put out more money. As of September 1st, they will be releasing about $11 million to fund vet tech. And starting October 1st, there will be another $45 million to fund vet tech. Big question is, how long does that last? Well, it will most certainly last for our Victor platoon, which that's already come and gone for the application. Will it last into 2024? We don't know. It depends on how many schools take advantage of that, how many people jump on that funding. We're hoping that it's still available, but the good news, even if it does run out of funding, right now there is a bill in the Senate. It has already passed out of the House, and it is awaiting a vote in the Senate to make vet tech a permanent part of VA. So it would be a permanent benefit, just like the GI Bill. Once that passes, this funding question will not be as nearly as big of a factor as it is now. We're not sure exactly how they're going to work it. Kind of have to wait and see what they say once the bill passes. But as of right now, they're good signs, positive signs for vet tech in the near future. Again, more funding coming in October, and hopefully, fingers crossed, that that bill passes out of the Senate. Hopefully by Christmas was what we're hoping for. We'll see if Congress can make some movement there. Option 2, the GI Bill. GI Bill is an option as long as you attend in person. Again, that's the VA's rules, not necessarily ours. That's just the way the VA works with the GI Bill, and that's actually one of the reasons vet tech was invented in the first place. GI Bill has some limitations when it comes to things like coding boot camps. But if you're willing to attend in person, the GI Bill is definitely an option. Finally, and I guess I should add one other thing, VR&E, which is formerly known as Voc Rehab at the VA. If you are a disabled veteran, talk to somebody at the VA and talk to them about getting a counselor to see if you qualify for VR&E funding, because that is another option. If you're a disabled veteran, you meet all the requirements to take part with, they will fund our program using VR&E. We've had several students come through. It's a great option if you can get it. It's just not available to everyone. Finally, we've got general scholarships. We've got a scholarship that will cover just about everyone, and our scholarships range in coverage from 80 to 100% of the tuition covered. So they're very generous, and again, we've got a scholarship that covers just about every demographic. The only factor that we require is that you get accepted to Code Platoon first. Then we make it very, very simple. This is not like a university where you have to write 10,000 word essay and get $500. This is filling out a very simple form, and we get you the best scholarship that we can find for you. If it's a 100% scholarship that you qualify for, we'll get you that. If it's an 80% scholarship, we'll get you that, and then we'll work with you on the remainder. Next slide, please. Also, SkillBridge. If you are currently on active duty and you are aware of SkillBridge, or as the Army likes to call it, CSP, because they like to be different, you can qualify for this thing called SkillBridge, which is a fantastic way to go through the program. In the last 180 days of service, DoD members are authorized to take part in a SkillBridge authorized program, which we are. I highly encourage you to look into this. If either you are currently active duty and coming up on your 180-day window, or you know someone who is, please send them this. It's not a well-publicized benefit that people know about. So please share the information on this. But SkillBridge is great. All of the application process for Code Platoon is the same for a SkillBridge student. The only thing that's added onto this is getting your command to sign off on you being able to do it. That's really what it comes down to. As long as your command says, yes, you can do this, you apply to Code Platoon, you get accepted, and you can take part in Code Platoon while you're still on active duty. You're basically released from duty. All you have to do is Code Platoon, do all the things that you would do as a student, but you're still active duty. You're still getting your paycheck and your benefits. And then once you get out of the military, you're ready to go. You've already gone through this training. So I highly encourage you to look into that. And I am the official SkillBridge rep, so I'm happy to talk to you more about that one-on-one if need be. But again, SkillBridge is a great option if you're still active duty and looking to do something to help prepare you to transition out into civilian life. Next slide, please.
I think that's it for your
That's it?
stuff. The rest
Cool.
is
Yeah,
the
that's a
tech stack.
technical stuff. So any questions on any of this? I'm sure there are. Let's see what, got a question in here. There's an additional 2 to 3 weeks of pre-work prior to each cohort, which now qualifies as DoD SkillBridge time. Is that accurate? I'm planning to attend X-ray platoon. What is the earliest date I can stay at SkillBridge, assuming I have command approval? So we started, we've always had pre-work for Code Platoon. Even, back when Charles went through, he did work that led up to the program. We've always had that. What we've added recently is something called Foundations of Programming, which starts 4 weeks ahead of every cohort. And that is specifically designed for you SkillBridge folk who need that extra time to prepare, basically. And it's open to everybody, but it's specific for SkillBridge in that, yes, we can sign a document that says you can take part in this for 4 weeks leading up to the actual start of the cohort. So whatever the start date of the cohort is, backdate that by 4 weeks. That's when you can start doing foundations of programming and working with our instructor, Guillermo, who I guess was in here Monday. So you'd start working with either Guillermo or Francisco might be doing it now. Yeah, so that is absolutely an option. Let's see, what are your graduation rates? Last I heard, our graduation rate is, I believe, 93%. So getting into the program, if you're accepted, you get through the application challenges and you're offered an acceptance and you start the program, there is a very high chance that you are going to finish the program. That's why we design the application process the way we do. And we want you to get, maximal opportunity through the cohort. We have plenty of instructors there to help. So again, the graduation rate is quite high. Is this without hiring grads to work as instructors or TAs at Code Platoon? We do have several former graduates here at Code Platoon, but our job placement rate, the last full calendar year of job placement data we have obviously is 2022. And I believe that it was 80% within 6 months were working in the industry, earning a median salary of $82,000 a year. That's, I believe that our most, Charles is bringing it up right there. That's our most recent, looks like it might be a little bit lower than what I just quoted you, 75%. We did have a little bit of a dip because of some of the massive tech layoffs that didn't directly affect us, but they did kind of indirectly affect us. But given all that, it's still pretty high numbers. But yeah, our outcomes page should have all of the most recent data that we have, and we're constantly updating that when we get new data. Let's see, with it becoming more difficult to get entry-level jobs, how do you perceive that you can help us be more successful to landing a job afterwards? So we have an entire career services team and path that starts immediately upon graduation. So this is something that we take very seriously at Code Platoon, simply because that's how we measure success. Yes, we want to give you the skills necessary to be a software engineer, but ultimately the mark of success for us is you landing a job and actually starting your career. That's what we mark as a win. And in fact, when we're talking about vet tech as a funding source from the VA, our funding from vet tech is directly related to you landing a role. So we put a lot of effort into that for numerous reasons. And it's a top-down, bottom-up effort as well. It's not just you learning the skills, but it's also us working, our career services team working with you on resume prep, interview prep, networking. And then also at the top, we're developing relationships with companies who want to hire our graduates. I was just in a meeting earlier. We were talking about, the companies that Charles works for has been a great supporter of us. We have numerous other companies. Bloomberg in New York City has hired several of our graduates. ExxonMobil has hired several of our graduates, JP Morgan and Chase. We work with these companies and try to develop these relationships so that they know that they can trust our graduates as they come out of Code Platoon. And they're coming to us, we're going to them, and we're developing these relationships for you so that when you graduate, it's not just this open field of guesswork. And we're trying to take that out as much as possible. So again, it's a robust effort from top to bottom with regards to career services. Let's see. And I don't know that you said with it becoming more difficult. I don't know that it's any more difficult. I don't know. Charles might have some insight on this, but again, there were obviously the big layoffs that everyone heard with Microsoft and Google and Meta and all of that. None of our graduates have ever gone to those companies. So the effects that we felt from that are more tertiary, if anything. But that seems to be rebounding. I don't know, Charles, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's like what I'll throw out there is, I mean, getting your first job in any industry is not easy. It's going to be the hardest job that you get. Code Platoon, and I mean, has a really well-rounded group of people that help. I mean, one, while you go to Code Platoon, they work on your resume. They also work on your soft skills. So like there'll be interview questions that you work on. Like everything is prepping you again to not just learn how to code, but how to land your first job. Once you have graduated, there is an individual, Rich Luby, who is, I can't remember his exact title, but he's basically the guy that wrangles all the jobs and is going to help you try and find your first job if you don't get placed with like an internship or apprenticeship directly. We also have an alumni job board. So there's a fairly active channel on Slack that once you graduate, you get added to, and people like if I work at Eighth Light and Eighth Light's hiring, like I'm going to let people know that, hey, we were hiring a new apprentice class or that we're hiring seniors. I will say things have probably tightened up a little bit around the industry, but it's one of those things where and you hear it on the news, right? Like things are tightening up and things aren't as easy anymore, but nothing's actually happened yet. So like at my company personally, we haven't laid anyone off, right? Like we've eased up on hiring a little bit, but we're still out there. We're still looking. No one's been let go. And I think a lot of this is waiting to see what happens next year. But I mean, all the doom and gloom that they've been talking about, that's going to been happening since 2020, and everything's going to collapse. Like it hasn't showed up yet. So, and AI hasn't replaced developers yet. Like that's another thing we get asked all the time. All of that stuff is overblown.
Indeed. Yeah, I would second that last part, especially like Charles said, I get that a lot, or is AI taking junior developers' jobs? I'm not a junior developer, so I'm not going to steal anybody's thunder here, but I can tell you that everyone I talk to says exactly what Charles says, which is that, it may have made some jobs a little bit easier. Like it's an easier trash can to pick up trash with or something like that, but it's not taking any jobs away. It might be just cleaning some things up, but no, in terms of the job seeking, like Charles said, it's a robust effort that we engage in here at Code Platoon. So that's something that we take very seriously. Rich Luby, director of career services that Charles mentioned, is a great guy to work with, and he works real hard to make sure that you have every opportunity possible to succeed once you graduate Code Platoon. And I should add too, that's a forever thing at Code Platoon. So you go somewhere, you get a job, and then you want to come back and maybe get some more assistance 2 years later, we're still here. We're still going to help out however we can. You're part of the Code Platoon family. We're always going to do that. So that's not something that goes away. Let's see. Do we have any other questions? Some companies run away from boot camp grads. I don't, I've heard that ever since I came to work at Code Platoon, and I just don't see it reflected necessarily. Our graduates are going to work at some very large companies, earning very handsome salaries with zero official education. Does it help to have a computer science degree? Sure. But we've launched the careers of, I don't know, we're over 200 people now who have launched careers that didn't have a computer science degree, and they're now making very handsome salaries as a software engineer. So it's absolutely possible, and we see it quite frequently. Have top secret clearances helped students' job placement in the past? I would have to ask Rich any kind of specific numbers on that. I will say, just from personal experience, having worked somewhat related to the defense industry for a while now, it's definitely not going to hurt. A top secret clearance is one of those things that's very expensive for a company to obtain or help you obtain as an individual, but it's also going to depend a lot on your role. It may have absolutely no benefit to a software engineer's role. Again, this is something that Charles can probably speak to better, but if you go to work for a financial firm, Chicago Trading Company or something, who's hired a lot of our graduates, do they care about you having a top secret clearance? Maybe not. But if you go to work for Northrop Grumman, would they care? Probably. So I think it depends a lot on who you're going to apply to, and but I'd have to ask Rich for specific numbers. So I'm sorry, I don't have any. I don't know, Charles, you have any insight into that?
Yeah, I do, because I don't have top secret, but I have secret.
That's what I had.
So it is a double-edged sword in and of the fact that you will be like, there are jobs posted out there for top secret clearance. Like, you have to have top secret clearance to even be able to apply for it. So it will open those jobs up for you. But the other problem is, and I can speak directly to this because for the last 4 years, I've worked on a DoD contract with the government, is that the government has fixed reimbursements, pay scales for everything, including contractors. So you, as a brand new developer, will like, all other things being equal, will basically, if you go work for a company and they put you on a project, like, they are going to be able to bill the government less for you as a new developer than as an experienced developer. And companies will do that and they'll put that out there. But what that does is that does limit your pay range. And so, not necessarily in the worst way, but like, I have a friend that applied at, I don't remember if it was Lockheed, Boeing, or Northrop Grumman or whatever, but he was actually fairly shocked at how low the starting pay was, for someone that basically was graduated from Code Platoon and had about 2 years of experience already. And it was coming in about 20K less than what he was making in the pure private sector as a starting offer. And that's literally because those companies are limited in how much they can charge the government for you. So yes, it will open up things, but if you're a top secret, if you got TS clearance and 10 years worth of development, like, people will come kidnap you in the night to give you a job. But as a new developer, it'll be a double-edged sword.
That sounds about right with everything I have dealt with in government contract world. So,
oh, it's frustrating because I've got an amazing junior developer on my project that is getting rolled off it because one of the other contractors that we subcontract through can't bill enough for this individual, even though she's outperforming like any of their developers that quote unquote have 8 years of experience, like, any day of the week. But that's government contracting.
Yeah, that's how it goes. Yeah, so, and that's what Charles is saying is very similar to other areas in which secret clearances may or may not matter. Yes, they help, but you end up getting locked in, kind of like he said. So it's kind of tricky. It depends on, but again, it depends on where you're looking and what you're looking at. So, any other questions? Any other questions? Anyone at all? Anything? And again, like I said, I'm here to talk to you. If you want to set up a time to chat privately, please do email me, greg@codeplatoon.org. This is what I do. I'll be here to answer questions throughout the whole process for you. So if you forgot something tonight and you think of it tomorrow, email me. That's what I'm here for. Some of you have probably, I know that I recognize some of the names. I've already spoken with you. So that's great. Yeah, but you're doing the work right now. That is the biggest step in this whole process, is learning the skill. And as I've probably told everyone who I've talked to already, but I'll say it again now. be thankful. This is actually one of the coolest industries in the world in this sense. And this one thing that makes it really cool. This is one of the rare areas in life, and I just turned 50 years old, so I've got a lot of experience in a lot of different areas. I can tell you this is one of the rare areas in life where you can learn whether or not you want to do this right away. You can actually start doing the skill immediately. I know people, a lot of people in the medical profession who have to go years and years of training before they actually see a patient and they realize this sucks. I don't actually like seeing patients. This is really hard. But they didn't know that till they went through 4 years or 6 years or 8 years of schooling. The cool thing about software development, engineering, and learning to write code is that you can sit down and do a class like this and start figuring out right away whether or not you want to do this for a living for very little to no cost. It's just your time. So invest everything you can, all of your energy into this to figure out, is this what I want to do? And if so, awesome. Move forward with it, dig in, learn as much as you can, and it will take you places. So that's my spiel, and I'm sticking to it. Any questions? Last takers? No? All right.
All right, Greg, thank you. I'll see you in October when we do this again.
Yeah, if I don't see you first in September when I'm out there.
Yep, yeah, I'll be there. So
Right on, right on. Well, hey, thanks everybody, and enjoy the class, and don't hesitate to reach out if you have questions.
all right, cool. So yeah, reach out to Greg. Again, his contact info, you all have it in the PDF. It's under session 8. He normally speaks during the last week, but he's on vacation next week. So you've all got this info. You can reach out to him. Just a couple of things that like he touched on. So and also, so Eric, like having top secret clearance, like I said, I don't think it hurts. At the I mean, like at any level, it proves that you're trustworthy to an employer. And also, I did not like, depending on the job that you're going for, and top secret is very expensive. I think like in the outside civilian world, that's like a 15 to 25K process to get top secret clearance. Um, Secret clearance is significantly cheaper and easier to get. And I've just got secret clearance. I did not have any clearance when I was in the military back in like 0105. I was just a grunt. Like they didn't give me any type of clearance or anything like that. I didn't need to know anything important. So I did not get it until I actually became a software developer. And even then, like I was at my company, and I'm one of a handful of people at my company that actually have the clearance, because there's only like 4 or 5 of us that work on this contract. Like it's not mandatory to have my job. So I may, when this contract wraps up for me, whenever it actually wraps up, like I will still have my active secret clearance for X amount of time after the contract. And if my company lands any more government work or something like that, that just means that I'd be a more likely candidate to get it, because they don't have to re-screen me or anything. So having a clearance won't hurt you. But like as a brand new developer, it may not help as much as you think it will. All right. So let's go ahead and scroll back up here through session 5. And we'll also talk about where we left off, which was the zeros challenge. I know one group had made pretty good progress on it by the end of the evening, even though you had a few minutes to look at it. Did anyone else solve it on Tuesday or anything like that on their own time? Nobody? All right. So what I'm going to do then is, let's see here. I did not save the groups from last time around. So I am able to drop everyone back into a new group. If you'd like to continue working on it, I can give you another 15-20 minutes or so. Again, I know one of the groups basically solved it. So they would kind of get dispersed amongst other people. But if you want more time to work on it, I'll give everyone more time to work on it. If not, I can kind of walk the class through it as is, and then we'll move into the slides and then the next set of challenges. So open to feedback on that one. Anyone?
One of my children was talking to me. Are you basically just asking if we just want to try again in the groups? Is that basically what you're asking?
Yeah, and knowing that one of the groups already solved it, so I'm gonna end up mixing up a bunch of people that have already solved it with other people, or I can go ahead and solve this one and we can move on to the next challenge.
I'd like to have the groups again if everybody else is okay with that.
Anyone? Yes, no. If not, we'll go back into groups here for about 15-20 minutes.
I'll be one for the other option if you want to just show it to us and then press on.
I'm probably going to break people out into groups at this point. All right, everyone, welcome back from the breakout rooms for finishing up the Remove Zeros challenge. So we're going to go ahead and get into it and go over some different solutions for it here. Just real quick, we're going to run down the prep work on this again. So for parameters, we're getting a number, right? So we're going to get like 1,001, whatever this is, 50 million, 680,019. That we need to remove all the zeros from. From there, we're going to return a number, and that number is going to have all zeros removed from it. So the 50 million should be 56,819. The 1,001 should just be 11. All right, so we've got some examples below, and we wrote some kind of generic pseudocode here where we know that we need to remove all the zeros from our number. Numbers do not have index position, so I can't do something like 1,001 box 2, like that isn't going to show me a zero. That's going to throw an error. This doesn't exist. So first thing I'm going to need to do is figure out how I can convert my number to something that I can index through. And we'll look to see if there's a built-in method for that. Once I convert my number to something where I can access the individual digits in my number by index, how do I target only zeros for removal? What type of basic building block allows me to iterate through every digit? All right, once I've removed all of the numbers, I need to, that doesn't make sense. I need to glue everything back together into one number. Is there a built-in for that? Do I need more than one built-in to do that? All right, so let's go ahead and take a couple of look here. So how do I split a number into an array? JS. All right, so store the integer value as a variable. We then need to typecast the integer to string. Okay, so we can't split a number, right? So we use the split method to make it an array of strings. So if I want to do something like this, so we'll go ahead and do console.log number. I'm just going to comment this one out for right now. Well, come on, reset to mine. And we'll go ahead and run this. All right, so I see my 1,001 in gold over here. So if I do a dot split, and I won't add anything in here, right? Number dot split is not a function, right? So if I say MDN number, and I look over here in alphabetical order, right? We go from parse-int to exponential. There's no split here. So instead, I have to change it to a string first so that I can then run split on the string. And so if I do string, all right, and I look over here, okay, here's split, right? And so this is something the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. If I split on an empty space, it will then, we're doing words 3 here, but if we just do words, right, there's my array. So notice how each of these gets basically on the space, we split it, right? So each word in the sentence is now its very own string in the index. So how do I do this? So I need to typecast the integer to a string, and I'm immediately thinking in my head how to do it in Ruby. How do we do this in JavaScript? Anyone know off the top of their head?
To string.
String, JS, right? Number the toString method. All right. So we've got that. So we can say toString. Let's run it. All right, now we see that 1001 is showing up in white over here. So we've got the string. So now we could do something like split. And we'll do it on basically just a empty string. And what that means is that each character of my string should then be split into its own element in an array, right? So there we go. There's 1 0 0 1. All right, so let's go ahead and take this out of our console.log and let's assign this to a variable. So we'll say let r of string, right? So array of string is now this. And so we'll make sure that this is still looking the way we want it to, and say r of string. Looks good to me. So let's go ahead. We'll go ahead and write a for loop. Or what we, yeah, we'll go ahead and keep it as a for loop for right now. And this is important. So you'll see this in a lot of challenges. And we want to continue to loop from r of string dot length. All right, so we're starting at 0, and as long as it's less than the length, so this would have a length of 4, and we're going to start at 0 and do 0, 1, 2, and 3. So we'll have 4 loops through there. And each time we want to increment by 1. So I plus plus in this instance. All right, here's our loop. Let's go ahead and take our console.log. Let's move it inside our loop. And we're going to go ahead and add box I here. And what that does is now, or actually, yeah. So our string is an array. So the first time through, this actually is going to look like this. It's going to be r of string 0, right? And I would expect that we're going to print that 1, and then we're going to do a plus plus, and the next time we loop through, it's going to be 1, and I'm going to expect it to see a 0 here, and then it's going to do 2. I'm going to expect it to print a 0, and then on the last loop 3 through, this is going to be equal to 3, and I would expect to see that trailing 1. So let's go ahead, let's see what happens. There we go, 1 0 0 1. All right, so now we have done these first steps, right? So how can I convert my number to something with an index position? It took me 2 steps, right? I had to convert my number to a string, and then I had to split my string into an array. Now, strings have index positions as well, but and this is kind of a trap if any of the teams tried to go down this, right? So if I just leave this as a string, when I run this, I still get it, right? So a string, so the string 1001 has index positions as well, right? So 0, 1, 2, 3. And so you can access characters in a string by their index position. But one thing you can't do, and again, we talked about this and it was a shout out and we were moving fast as like the first or second night, strings are immutable. So what I cannot do is modify a single character in a string by its index position. It will yell at me and tell me that that string is immutable and it cannot make the change that I'm requesting it to make. And I have absolutely tried to do it with a string in front of the class and fell flat on my face in front of everyone. And so I will never forget that lesson. Oops, split instead of spit. All right. And so now we could do some conditional logic here, right? And so what I would look at is a if-else statement, or we could even do a ternary operator, right? And whereas we cannot mutate one part of like one character in a string or a part of a string, because strings are immutable in JavaScript, we can reassign the value inside of the array, right? So what I would look at doing next would be something like this. So if our string I is strictly equal to 0, right? Then we could do something like this, and we could reassign the value to an empty string. If not, it would just remain R of string I. All right. And so now at the end of my loop, we'll take a look at the entire array again. Whoops. And what did I do wrong here? So R of string I triple equal to 0. If that is true, make it an empty string. If not, it stays that. And so does anyone see what I did wrong here? And I did not do it on purpose. I made the mistake genuinely. So I'm not, this is not a, like the teacher is trying to get you. I screwed up. Can anyone see where I screwed up?
Is it the triple equal?
Yep, it is. And because what am I doing right here?
You're doing that strict comparison. So whatever's within R of string has to be a numeric value.
Right.
But you have
And
a string there.
yep. So this is a string, right? And now one solution, and this is the bad way to solve it, is I could do something like this, but the better way to solve it is to do this. All right. And I was comparing string representations of numbers to an actual numeric value, unironically, and I was blowing myself up. So now when I hit run, it still does it. Now I'm lost. All right, what's going on here? Where did I go wrong with this? So 0. That's also what I did wrong. I'm not actually doing anything here. It would be R of string I. Actually, we could just do R of string I. And we can assign it to the ternary. And now, let's see, there we go. 2 false starts. So like I said, instructor doesn't know everything, even though I've solved this challenge a bunch of times and doing it from memory. All right, so now I have gotten rid of all of my zeros. I've just turned them into empty strings. So we can take a look in here as well. All right, we get the same thing. Now, what we can do is, how do I change an array into a string JS, right? That's not what I was looking for. I didn't even know you could do that. What does that even do? I think this changes everything inside the array to a string. No, it doesn't, but it does give me this. So, which is not what I'm looking for. And so it's probably because I did a bad search. So we don't want to turn them into a string. We want to combine them. There we go. So we're looking for join, right? And so join, and we looked at this when we were doing the built-ins, right? If we run this, so if you don't give it anything, you'll get comma separated. If you give an empty string, you'll get basically all the elements with no spaces in it, and then you can also add a custom one. So let's go ahead and I wonder if this works within two string. No, it does not. All right, good. Now I'm not going crazy. So we'll do join. All right, so now we've got everything glued back together. And we're still seeing this in white, which means that we're still as a string. And so now we could do something like this, right? So we could take this and we could say parse int. We looked at this one before. Now we're back to gold. We're still getting false, but we can take this out of the console.log and we can return it. And there's our trues, right? So this is how you would solve this with a for loop. And so notice how that when we joined everything together, it automatically, excuse me, got rid of our empty strings, right? So when we were right here, right, we've got some empty strings in here. When we join it, it automatically, it just treats these as nothing, right? Because they are nothing. Right, they automatically go away. So that's how we'd solve it. So this would be one way to solve this. We could also solve it with a for, I believe it's a for in loop. Is the specialized loop for here, variables, data types, operators, functions, control flow, iteration. Right, so we could write a for, or I'm sorry, a for of, which would clean it up, and then we would go through each of the elements in the array. All right. And Doug, do you want to share what your first group came up with as far as a solution?
Sure, I can do that.
You want
Let
to,
me, yeah, let me grab the screen. I've got okay, just let me comment this out.
if you just want to drop the code snippet into the chat and then I'll paste it in here.
Oh,
so
okay.
have a
That's
copy of
that's
it.
perfect. I can do that.
I'll let you walk through your guys' thought process on that.
Okay. And let's get the
Or I probably have it in.
There you go. This should.
All right, so if we run this, true and true.
Yeah.
So this does the exact same thing that this does up here. So why don't you talk through how you thought about this?
Yeah. So when we worked through this, the first thing we kind of thought is, okay, how do we get indexes from this? Because that's what we needed to do. We wanted to find a location where all the zeros were. And as Charles talked about, we need to convert it to a string. But then once we got it to a string, I was thinking, okay, how do I get this to break out to an array? And I found the split command. But what I also noticed in the split command is I could tell it what character I want it to split on. And in this case, I told it to split on the 0. And what you see here, as you see on the screen, when you run that output, all right, it just leaves a blank there. So if you pass in a join, and then you just give it the double quotes there to join on a blank space, when it returns, then it will kind of bypass that null entry in the array and just join the number. And of course you got to do the number parent the number string to convert it back to an actual value.
Yep, awesome. And so this is, again, does the exact same thing, leveraging more built-ins. We don't need the loop. And this is a great solution for that, right? And I mean, this could even go far as to be like a one line where we would just take this whole thing like this. And you can get rid of this. And so now all of this code becomes this, right? And so like this would be a production level solution to something that we would need to remove zeros from numbers. So nice job to that group that figured that one out the first time. All right, cool. So that is it for the remove zeros challenge. Any questions on either of the ways that we solved it? All right, so it is 7:18. Let's go ahead and take a quick break here. Why don't we'll kick back off and we'll run through the slides starting at 7:25. So we're going to take a 5-6 minute break here. All right, welcome back from the break. It is let's see here, 7:32 p.m. Central Time, Wednesday, August 23rd. We're going to start the slides for session 5, and tonight we're going to talk about scope. I think we're going to talk about maybe hoisting in there too with scope. Yep, looks like we will. All right, so we've already experienced this some throughout class, right? So in JavaScript, scope refers to where variables and functions are accessible in your code. Global scope, any variable declared outside of a function is going to be in the global scope. You can access these variables anywhere in the program. Local scope, anything defined inside of a function is only accessible in the function, and any functions or blocks of code inside of it. All right, and so let's go ahead and let's look at an example of that, right? So if I say let number equal 7, or we'll just call this num1, right? Am I at the global or local scope right now?
Global.
Global, correct. And so I can say something like this. So I can say let multiply equal A, B, oops, arrow, that, and we'll say return A times B. Right, and so we can say let num2 equal 10. And if we come down here and we call our multiply function, right, we get 70. Now, we have taken our global variables and fed them into our function. But we could also add a global variable do this, right? And so we still got to num1 and num2 without basically feeding them in as parameters because they're at the global scope. We can access it anywhere, right? And same thing, if I say let num3 equal, we'll say 13, and then I could say num1 plus num2 plus num3, right? I get 30. So I added those three numbers together. But if I do console.log num3, right, it's staying white. It's not turning into anything else. It's not throwing an error message yet, but it will, right? Num3 is not defined because num3 is inside my function and it is inside the local scope. Now, where this can be bothersome, right, is I can do something like this as well. All right. And so if I call change to string up here before I do anything else, right, I get not a number and then 71013, right? Because I have a global variable here that can be modified by different parts of the application. So different functions in my code are making changes to this that can then screw up what is expected down here. And this is why we want to minimize the use of global scope whenever possible, because this is basically a unintended side effect. This is not something that we wanted, right? And again, when we look at code where it's all kind of stacked on top of each other, it becomes very obvious. But if we think back to last week where like I showed you what it looks like to start up a React project or a Django project, and we have dozens or hundreds of files and different parts of the application can reach out and touch that global scope, that is where you can run into issues. All right, and so that's why it's important to stay with local scope whenever possible. Any questions about what I did here? Right, and right, so like a for loop, Right, so when I run this, and let me just comment this out. Right, so run this, change to string is not defined, that. So we need to comment this out then. Num3 is not defined, that's still an error. There we go. So there, now I'm console.logging I, right? I've declared I, and it looks weird because it's inside the parens, right? So like for is a function basically in JavaScript, and we're feeding it these parameters, right? So a for loop is just a pre-built function that iterates. And so I is available inside the local scope. But if I console.log I outside of it, we run into that same thing, right? Reference I is not defined. All right, any questions on local scope? All right, so basically this is just what we talked about. So let name equal Tom, accessible everywhere in your code. Console.log name, the name variable is accessible within the say hello function because it's within the global scope. Function say hello, return name, right? Output Tom. So local scope, function, say my age, let age equal 25, return age. If you try and access the variable age outside of the curly braces for the function, you'll get that reference error. All right, hoisting, you don't need to worry too much about this. Hoisting is a JavaScript mechanism where variables and function declarations are moved to the top of their scope prior to code execution. Right, so if we console.log name and then we do var name equal Tom, we will get an undefined for that first one because it actually takes the variable declaration and moves it to the top. But remember, when we do, whoops, both of these, this is a two-step process. Remember, we're declaring our variable and then we're doing, then we're assigning it a value. All right, and so this is what it looks like behind the scenes when you run your code. Again, this isn't anything that you really need to worry about for the time being. Okay, so that is it for the session 5 slides. So we can get into the next challenge, and I'll try and give a little bit more time for this. 7:42. Let's pick out a challenge here, and maybe we can do a full half hour on that and come back and explain it, and then we'll do another one together. All right, so we just did remove zeros, average velocity. No, let's go ahead and take a look at alphabet code real quick and see if that's one that we want to tackle. Where are your files? Click the play button. There we go. All right, write a method that takes an uppercase letter of the alphabet as a string and returns the integer and corresponding to its place in the alphabet. All right, so let's go ahead. I'm gonna go through the prep on this real quick. We will tackle this one. So real quick. Got that in there. And let's fork it. It's good. All right. So we are going to write a method that takes in an uppercase letter of the alphabet as a string and returns the integer corresponding to its place in the alphabet. So we're going to get one parameter, which is a string. And we're going to return a number. All right, so there is some high-level pseudocode to get us started. So let me grab this. I'm going to drop this into the chat. All right, so there's that. Let me go ahead and just read this real quick. So for the pseudocode, I will need to create some sort of a data type or data structure that I can compare my provided letter. So that type structure should give me the ability to identify the order in the alphabet that the letter represents. I should then be able to return that number. All right, so fairly straightforward on this one. Again, it's 7:47. So I'm going to give us until we'll say we'll say 8:17. And let me go ahead and pause. All right, everyone, welcome back from the alphabet code challenge. Looks like all four of the groups were able to get one type of solution or another here. So we'll go ahead and go through one of the solutions, and then we'll talk about some of the different ways that this could be solved. And I also had one of the groups, when I was poking my head in, they solved it in a way I'd never seen it solved before. So we'll talk about that as well. All right, and you can see my screen. We've got the challenge pulled up here.
Yes.
Awesome. All right, and so let's see here. So just to run back over this real quick, I'm getting a single character string that is a uppercase letter. And I want to be able to basically find where it falls in the alphabet, right? So A through Z, 1 through 26. Again, we know first off, I'm counting. So my mind kind of jumps straight to an array, all right? So that's one way that we could solve it. And we know that computers start counting at 0 and humans start counting at 1 most of the time. So I'm probably going to have to do a little bit of adjustment here with my indexing to make sure that I'm getting the right thing, right? Because if I just do an array here, we'll say let R equal A, B, C, right? And if I do console.log r.index of A, right, I get 0. So we need something that looks more like this, right? And so we get 1, which would be correct for each of those, right? And this is a built-in method, index of, right? So I run index of on an array, and then I give it a value that I want to check. And if it's in there, it will give me a value of the, and it'll return a value of the index. So in A, it'll be 0. And if it doesn't exist in there, it gives me a -1, which I'm adding 1 to, so I get 0, right? And so I haven't done the full thing here. But so the next thing that pops into my head, because we talked about this a little bit in the previous one, remove zeros, right? Where we didn't do it, like we converted it to an array, we split it out to array because we couldn't do it to a string because strings are immutable. But we do know that strings have index values as well. So that does make me think, if I go to string, do I have an index of? And it looks like I do. Right here in between includes and is well formed. And I can tell you, in 5 years of learning to code, I have never once used the built-in method is well formed. So like I said, there's a lot of built-in methods, and some of them you will use, some of them you won't really use all that often or ever. So what that tells me is, instead of having to do like A in quotes and then B, C, D, and like write this giant array, maybe I could look at doing this as a string instead, instead, right? So if I say A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, and before I put all this effort in, put the whole thing out, let's see what happens when I give this A again, right? And we'll take this off for right now. And this is no longer an R, we'll just call it a string. Or I guess we could even be more descriptive and we'll just call this alphabet. And we'll say alphabet index of. I get 0, 0, 0. That looks good to me. If I do B, I get 1s, right? And so if I add my +1 here, so 2, that would be the correct answer, right? And so now I know that I got the correct answer. So let's do JK, oops, JK, oh, come on, caps lock, JKLMNOPQRSTUVWXY and Z. All right, and so I can take this out of my console.log and let's convert this to a return. And let's go ahead and run and see what happens. All right, so I've got a false, true, false. So, oh, and that's because I've hard-coded in the letter B here. So I'll want to take out my hard-coded value here, and we're going to replace that with the index of letter. There we go, true, true, true. So this is probably the easiest way to solve this one, right? Like this is easier than doing an array. And the other thing we could do is an object, right? So this is probably the most difficult way to do it, or labor intensive, right? We could say A1, B, 2, right? And this would then allow us to basically get rid of having to adjust for the index value. So I could say something like console.log object B, right? And it's actually just going to return it. I don't have to adjust or anything like that. But this is way more labor intensive to set up the 26 letters in the alphabet before here. And then if we were to look at next steps on something like this, where I know that I have data coming in, it's one thing if I know that this is machine data that's always going to be entered in the same way. But if this is user data where I have say a web form that someone's allowed to submit something, there's also some extra steps that I'd probably like to take here. The first one being is that I would do something like this. So if we said, right, so now if we run this, we get a false because lowercase c is not the same as uppercase c. So I would slap a 2 uppercase in here. Right, and that way I know that I'm doing, like, I'm cleaning my data a little bit before I run it. Right, so that way if people are giving me lowercase letters, I could also basically do a check here to make sure that, or the other thing I could do is if right, and now I'm using letter in 2 different places, right? So we're checking to make sure that it's even in there. And then we could say else right? And so I could then write a simple test down here that says something like this. And because I'm not, because now I've got code, and this is something where we look at, there's something in coding that we call refactoring. And so that as we continue to write code, we'll maybe find changes that we want to go back and make better, right? So if I was just using letter, it's not a big deal, but now that I'm using letter to uppercase twice, what I would probably look at doing is pulling these out of here because I don't want to have to keep updating these in 2 different places. And I could do something like this. I could do assignment in place where I say letter is equal to letter to uppercase, right? And now I can just go back to building my function off letter down here. Alphabet includes letter to looks good, and that looks good, right? And then so now we're saying, and we go back here and look at string string prototype split here. So we have also string has includes, right? So the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog, word fox. So since that includes, so we know that we can search for a character in here as well. And so we're going to say, if the letter that you gave me to uppercase is located inside the string of alphabet, I want you to return the index value of it +1, which will give me the position in the alphabet. Else, I basically want you to return an error message. Right, and we get all true still. And same thing here, like if I get rid of the actual, oops, equals, see, we can actually see that it will return this is not a valid letter, right? Same thing here. This should return the number 26, right? And so now we've made our function a little bit better. The next thing we could do if we wanted to is, like, the first thing I would target is this always going to be the alphabet, right? Does every alphabet look the same, right? Does the German alphabet look the same as the American alphabet? Does the French? I mean, even if we're still using like the anglicized alphabet, right? Like different countries have different versions of it. So we could do letter and alphabet, right? And then we could do, we don't even need this in here, so we could pull this out of here, right? And we could say English alphabet. And then when we call our function down here, we would do the letter and then English alphabet, right? And because that way we could have a French alphabet, right? And whatever that looks like. I mean, just for example, like we could have the same characters, but we could do them in a different order, right? And there'll be some special characters in there and everything like that. But this allows us to now dynamically feed in different alphabets to check against, right? And so if I console.log these out for right now, and I just do this, like this should still come back true, right? So I'm feeding in my English alphabet into alphabet and the letter that I'm checking against. And then I don't need to declare it in here as a local variable, right? And then I'm checking against it in here. Right. Any questions on any of the steps that I continue to build on this challenge with, or the challenge itself? Sorry, I've got the chat box hidden. Let me see if there's anything popping up in there. All right. And then Halsey, you had actually stumbled upon, or I shouldn't say stumbled upon, you were solving this in a way that I had never seen anyone solve this before. How did you find that table that you were looking at?
I guess I don't think it was just from another problem. I just saw like every letter will have a character, will have like the ASCII code. So yeah, I just Googled yeah. And so this includes A to Z and yeah, lowercase and uppercase, and it gives it like a universal number that they'll all have.
Right, so we have A is 65, B is 66, right? So we're seeing a pattern here. These are going in numeric order, just like they were before. And so basically this minus 64 would give us the actual number that we're looking for, right? And then what was the built-in that you were using?
Character code at.
Okay, char code at, right?
Yeah.
The char code at method of string value returns the integer between 0 and 65,535, representing the UTF-16 code unit at the given index. All right, that is a lot of words, right? But what it does is it tells us where we're at with this. So if we were to do something like this, right? So I'm just going to comment this stuff out right now. And then I'll also, I'm going to delete this for right now. It'll put it back in, right? So we could say console.log letter, right? And we do that. Whoops, English alphabet is not defined. Don't want it in here anymore either. Right, so that's A, and then we can do char code at, I believe that was it, char code at the zero base index of the desired character. If there is no character at the specified index, nan is returned. Maybe that wasn't it. Nope, that is 65, right? And so now we can do minus 64. Right, and there it is. And so let's go ahead and do this. And we'll take this out of our console And we'll just return this. And we get some trues there, right? And again, I took out my 2 uppercase and everything like that. But this is what we're looking for, right? So this would be another way. And as I said, I've taught this class like 5 or 6 times now, and I've never seen anyone solve it this way before. So again, hats off for the like the ingenuity on that one. And this would be another good way to solve this problem. Right, because this is a lot less code than what we had going on with the other ones. All right, don't need the dictionary, or basically like the string with the alphabet in it, anything like that. All right, any questions on what we did here with this built-in? And let's go ahead and turn that back on. And for now, let's move this here. And we'll turn this back to alphabet. And we run it. Get our trues. That, and that. That. All right, cool. So there we are with that one. And let's go ahead and take a look at what the next challenge would be. It's 8:33. We'll see if it's we just did alphabet code. Rectangles, pretty easy. Average velocity is easy. Gravity is easy. Hot potato is really hard, but for a bad reason. You just basically have to know a trick. Let's take a look at illegal work. I think that's a good one. All right. Write a function that takes in a sentence and an illegal word and returns a Boolean indicating whether or not the sentence contains the illegal word. Capitalization should not matter. Right? So below there, the legal word is fudge, that returns false. But I didn't say fudge where it matches exactly, we get a true, but I didn't say fudge. The case is off, but we still get a true. So it's not going to be case sensitive. All right, let's go ahead and fork this. And I will break everyone back out into the groups again right after we get done doing the prep. Okay, they've already got these pulled over here. And so let's grab this. All right, so we're getting 2 parameters, right? So we're getting a send to 1 sentence, which is a string search through, 2 word string to search for. All right, return is going to be a Boolean. All right, so this one should be pretty straightforward. It's 8:36. I'm gonna give you about 20 minutes to work on this. Within the previous challenges, we've already talked about some Boolean values. Excuse me, not Boolean, excuse me, 1 second. Some built-ins that you could use to solve this pretty easily. All right, so what I'm going to ask, and what most people will probably go for, is they're going to go straight for the built-ins, solve it, get it working. Once you've used the built-ins to solve this in a line of code or two, do me a favor so that you're getting some repetition in. See if you can figure out how to solve this with a loop as well. And the reason I say this is when you interview for an entry-level position, this is the type of challenge you're going to get. And maybe they'll have you live code it like in an IDE, or what they'll have you do is the most dreaded thing in interviewing is called whiteboarding. And they're going to ask you to solve an algorithm, but you're not going to be doing it in an IDE. You're basically going to be writing pseudocode or walking people through and like writing notes of what you would do each step of the way, right? Like kind of what we do with our pseudocode beforehand. And if someone said like, hey, reverse this string, and you say, okay, easy, like I would run the string dot reverse, which that is exactly what you would do in real life if you had to reverse a string for an application. But if you've got a 45-minute interview and it took you 3 minutes to do that part, you should be like, your spidey senses should be tingling at that point that they're going to ask me to do something else, which is they're going to then say, okay, solve this without using the dot reverse built-in, right? So I'm not going to tell you the name of the built-in. You may already know, but some of you may have to look it up. So I want you to stretch and find out how you do this with a built-in, but then look at the challenge. How would I then do this if I was forced to use some sort of a loop to solve the problem? All right, so let me go ahead and pause the recording. All right, everyone, 8:57 p.m. Central Time. Just got a few minutes left of class here. So did anyone get to the point where they were able to solve it with a loop?
Olga and I were able to do that.
Cool. All right, so it sounds like maybe one group was able to do it. So we will talk about this tomorrow at the start of class. And again, this is a very common interview technique where they give you something that seems pretty straightforward on the surface, and what they're looking to do is push you to failure, right? Like I can take any one of these challenges and make it progressively harder just to see how far someone will make it. We do the same thing when people interview with my company. Like we give them what seems like a fairly straightforward challenge on the surface, and then I've seen some pretty senior people sweat at the end of an hour because it just keeps going and going, and there's always more to uncover. So we will, when there's opportunities, I will call this out in challenges that we work on in class where maybe there's a really easy built-in way to do it. And as you saw in some of the other challenges, right, like we're searching through something with an index verse, like we could just write this, right? And these are both solutions, but this one's a little bit more complicated. This one forces you to start thinking about data structures, the different building blocks that we have available, and basically the things that we want to keep practicing and getting repetition on while we're working on the foundations here. Now, are there any questions for me before I let the class go for the evening? Okay, so the one last thing I'll throw out to you is Nika did start a study group, and I think there's 3 or 4 people from class in there. If anyone else is interested in joining it, feel free to Slack her or myself, and I'll get you added into that separate channel. It looks like they're working on some challenges in there that are outside the list that we have. So again, some extra repetition, some extra practice. So if anyone's interested in that, like I said, just Slack one of us and I'll get you added to the channel. All right. Outside of that, 9 p.m. Central, thank you very much for making it through session 5, and I will see everyone tomorrow at 6 p.m. Central.